Hello and welcome to another episode of a Brothers Creed podcast where we talk about motivation, experiences, and we explore the world around us. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
I'm Ethan. Today we're going to be talking about some of the most interesting prison breaks in history.
Well, at least ones that we can cover within a 50-minute time frame.
That's true.
There's a lot of interesting ones
out there. These are some of the ones that we find interesting.
Yes.
We're going to talk about, anything from kind of some more recent stuff to some older stuff, and kind of how they did it, and maybe we can even talk about would that even be possible today.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's dive in.
All right, let's do it.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, then you can change. Everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world, a decent world.
So one of the things that this small one I saw, I hear about people breaking out of jail all the time, like on the news.
Yeah.
I hear about it all the time. In fact, I just
Really?
I feel like I hear it regularly.
I guess I don't watch the news.
I mean, just yesterday I heard this was June 7th. There was a jailbreak where 3 inmates in Missouri County escaped jail on a late Friday night by digging through the plaster ceilings in their cells. So apparently the building was an old building. The ceilings were made of plaster. So they dug through their ceilings, and then they went. There was 2 guys in a cell. They dug over to another cell. They dug through, and then they got 1 guy out of the other cell. And they just left through a maintenance door. They're still on the run.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If I had life in prison, it's like, why would you not try to? Why would you not try to escape? What are they gonna do? Give you more time?
Yeah.
Put you. I mean, they could put you in isolation, but maybe you might already be in isolation. Or, I mean, it's like, why not try to escape?
Yeah. Well, it happens all the time, and then these people. They're suspected of, this is just happened the other day, they're suspected of being on the run still. Well, they thought they left Missouri, and there was one that just happened 2 or 3 weeks ago where they captured 1 or 2 of the guys. They were caught climbing over the fence, and there was a woman that was standing outside, and they questioned her for being an accomplice. I mean, this stuff happens to this day. I think we kind of have this idea. It's like, oh, it has to be some, like the show Prison Break. You know the show Prison Break?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, oh, it has to be some insanely complex thing where I have to tattoo a map of the whole prison on my back, But really, it's just as simple as digging through the ceiling and leaving through a maintenance door, It's like, wow. Some of these cases are quite bizarre, but I know that you've got some interesting ones.
Yeah, so the first one I want to talk about was a very famous one. There's been movies about it, and Mythbusters did a thing on it too. Well, and it's the famous escape from Alcatraz. So, on the morning of June 12th, 1962, guards at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary made a shocking discovery. Inmates Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin had escaped. Their daring deed baffled the authorities at Alcatraz. Since Alcatraz is over, since it is over almost a mile, 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco, and it is so heavily guarded that it's known as
The Rock.
The Rock.
Yep.
Right? So not only did they escape, right, but if they escaped the heavily guarded prison, then they would have had to swim through the pretty cold water of San Francisco.
That has weird tides and currents,
everything else. Very choppy water over a mile. So no, they can't be. Nothing can't be done.
Actually do have like a triathlon or like an event where people swim the Alcatraz.
Yeah,
it's like swim to Alcatraz event.
Yeah,
and you can do that. But,
you could definitely do it,
but it's not like. I mean, it's not easy for any means, especially someone who's wearing clothes,
or been in prison. So, Alcatraz has held prisoners since the Civil War, and it was actually refortified into a prison in 1934, and it held inmates like Al Capone and a couple other famous guys. So one of the things with Alcatraz is that there were armed guards at every outpost. They had just installed new iron bars on every cell, and like we said, it was over a mile off the shore of San Francisco. And so between 1934 and 1962, there had been 13 attempted and failed escapes from Alcatraz. But that didn't deter our boy Morris and the Anglin brothers. So these three guys, they fled Alcatraz on June 11th, so the day before they were found, right? Actually, just a year before Alcatraz was closed permanently. Morris was a career burglar, but he was actually very, very intelligent. He was probably, they said he was one of the smartest inmates in Alcatraz. And the Anglin's brothers were car thieves and just kind of petty criminals that they just kept getting thrown in, and so they got put in Alcatraz. So what they did is they stole spoons and saw blades and spent over 6 months enlarging the ventilation ducts for their cells, first off. And Morris would actually play the accordion while the two brothers were working with their spoons and their saw blades to kind of muffle the sounds of the scratching and the everything else. So once they got the ducts big enough to where they could fit into, like, their body into it, they would cover the ducts with cardboard, and kind of they had made some kind of paint that they covered the cardboard with, so it kind of looked like the same color as the wall. And it was kind of underneath like this little thing, so you couldn't really, you didn't really notice it when you were just walking by the cell, or even if you were standing in the cell, unless you knew it there. So the ducts led to a utility tunnel that they collected a bunch of raincoats, and they had tried to make, well, I mean, maybe they made, but they had tried to make a 6 by 14 foot inflatable raft out of these raincoats and like glue and duct tape and whatever things that they could find. Basically the last way that they were able to escape is that they created paper mache dummy replicas of their own heads and used like their own hair and paint and paper mache and everything, and they left these heads in their beds, kind of like covered up by the blankets a little bit, because whenever the guards went by, they would do body checks, and I think one of their rules is when they do checks is they have to see skin, and so they had painted these heads, these paper mache heads, to be kind of like peach color, skin colored. So whenever the guard is just walking by at 3 o'clock in the morning to do a body check, it's just like, yeah, with his flashlight, because everybody's sleeping. Yeah. And so they put these heads out. They went into the ducts. They got this raft that they had been making out of the rain coats. They took it up to the roof, and no one ever saw him again. So in the FBI launched a full investigation of what happened, and in 1979 that investigation was concluded. Basically, 1979. This actually happened in 1962. So this is 17 years later. The FBI was finally like, the conclusion basically was that all three men were dead.
They must have drowned, because there's no way they would have made it across.
Well,
of course, they wouldn't admit that they had.
Well, yeah, and not everyone is as convinced as the FBI is that these guys are dead. Particularly the Anglin brothers. two sisters that claim that Clarence had called them, one of the brothers had called them as a free man.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so,
Interesting.
I don't know. Interesting.
Maybe it was a ghost call.
Yeah. Maybe. Or maybe they're out there. Maybe they're out there. They got their name changed. And I mean,
they're out there listening to a Brothers Creed podcast right now. Go ahead and call us in.
Hey, if you're one of them Anglin brothers or Morris or whatever, you be old, but give us a call, man. We'll have you on. We'll fly you to North Carolina and do a special event,
a special episode. Yeah. What a crazy. So did they find the raincoats in?
So
they
found the raincoats. They found like a bunch of the cutoffs from the raincoats because they had been making this big raft, right?
Uh-huh.
And so they
do they think that they didn't use the raft, or they've used?
I don't know. I don't think they found the whole raft. I think they just found like bits and pieces. So you would think that if they took the raft into the water, that they would have found it like, somewhere downstream, but maybe it just sank. I mean, it's at the bottom of the
they just put a
San
knife
Francisco
through it.
Bay. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. That was a cool one. So one of the ones I have here is epic, like level escaping. So this is the story of El Chapo, Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Lorea, who is a Mexican drug kingpin of the Sinaloa cartel. So this history, the story kind of starts in 1993 when El Chapo, that was his nickname, a lot of these guys have nicknames, was involved in a bloody shootout in the Guadalajara airport. The authorities got him and put him in jail in 1995. So he was in jail in Puente Grande, which is in Jalisco, prison from 1995 to 2001. And basically, he had he was the, how do they say, the rule of the roost, or what's the saying? He ruled the roost or something. I don't know.
He was a king.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a saying that, but I don't forget what it exactly is. But anyway, he was basically a king within this thing. He had all the creature comforts. Women could come in and see him. He had all
within the prison.
Yeah, he had all this nice stuff. He had the warden under his thumb the whole time, basically. He spoiled the warden with new homes, properties. The warden's son got into some kind of medical issue. He paid all the warden's son's medical bills, cash, gifts, all this kind of stuff. And the warden would just allow it. In January of 2001, the Supreme Court of Mexico ruled that the U.S. could extradite prisoners to the U.S. prison system. And so that made El Chapo very nervous because he knew that he was a wanted man. And so it's interesting. Later, that warden that was under his thumb just abruptly left right before in like 2000, in the year 2000, because there was a bunch of questions about like bribery and corruption, and so he just left up and left. And when this whole thing came out, this Supreme Court ruling that said the U.S. could extradite criminals, El Chapo got scared. So the next day, he left the prison. It was said that he was the story goes that it was said that he was smuggled out the back door into a laundry cart by the guards, but others claim he literally just probably walked out the door in a guard uniform. The laundry cart story is kind of a tall tale, like Captain Jack Sparrow wrastling up making a raft out of some turtles.
2 sea turtles.
But so they think that, I don't know if that's true or not, but allegedly that escape cost him $2.5 million. That's how much he paid to get out of that prison. So,
which probably really wasn't that much
in the context of things. So anyway, he got out of that prison. He returned to active duty in the cartel, but he remained in hiding. He was very slippery, if you will. He would be able to evade the police all over the place. So he returned to active duty within the cartel. He's the kingpin of the cartel. And he went back to his hometown in Sinaloa to visit his mother and his family. And his hometown protected him. There's this area in Mexico called the Golden Triangle. between Durango, I think Guadalajara, and Sinaloa. It's in that area of like kind of Chihuahua, Mexico, northern Mexico, and it's so out in the middle of nowhere that it's very difficult for the police or army to get there. These roads are often like you can go out on a dirt bike, but that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the cops show up in their vehicles and stuff, that word travels very fast, especially when everybody in the whole town is bought off. And so everybody in the town was bought off. He would literally, everybody in the town was farming opium and farming marijuana. And
didn't he build schools and build libraries?
Well, that was Pablo Escobar, but this guy was very generous. This guy was very generous as well. The farmers would grow poppy and marijuana, and he would buy it from them at a wholesale price. So they were happy. They were like, "He's buying it from me." He would charge them a 30% tax to guard their crops from the army or police, though. In one case, there's a guy who kind of renegotiated with El Chapo and said, well, how about, you just pay me, how about we just split the profit, like you pay me for my seeds and we'll just split the profit 50-50 on my farm. And he was like, okay. And the guy was talking about how, amenable he was to making that kind of a change, which, isn't characteristic of a drug lord kingpin.
Yeah.
And usually there's a lot of like strife between the actual growers and the drug lords themselves. So he had this whole town paid off, and they would basically do anything to protect him. He became basically a legend because the government could not catch him. People would tell stories of how him and his bodyguards would walk into a restaurant, take everyone's cell phones, and he would eat lunch or dinner, and then they would return everyone's cell phones and pay for everybody's meals. And so, he was just kind of like that. He was on the run for 13 years. They couldn't catch him. In 2014, he was recaptured, though. There was a joint operation with the U.S. Marshals, the Mexican Navy, and the local police to capture him while he was on vacation in Mazatlan. They raided his hotel room and captured him while he was in his bed with his wife. He had 2 twin daughters. He had twin children. And he actually got up from his bed and he started kind of fighting him and wrestling him. He didn't go for the shotgun that was right beside his bed, so they didn't kill him, but they did definitely capture him. Between the recapture and his second escape, so he escaped again eventually, he argued back and forth with the courts over his arrest ad nauseum. Like, he had paid lawyers, and there was all this stuff about, well, the Navy didn't have a warrant to come in and arrest him like that. And then all this stuff, and there's fighting extradition to the U.S. prison system because the U.S. was like, hey, give him to us. And Mexico was like, no, we can handle it. We'll give him to you after he serves his 100-year sentence. And then it's like, okay. And so in July of 2015, he escaped for the second time. He went into the shower. So in his cell, there was like a little tiny wall where there was a shower that you could see on the camera. He went into a shower, and basically he pulled up a giant concrete piece from the floor, moved it out of the way, went down into a tunnel. Went down there was a house that was just a little bit less than a mile, 0.93 miles away from the prison, that his team had built a tunnel from that house. The tunnel is 33 feet under the ground. 33 feet under the ground. The tunnel is 5 feet 7 inches tall, 30 inches wide. I mean, this thing was legit. It had like ventilation. It had
support structures,
support structures, like modern support structures, and it even had like a rails within it, and it had a motorcycle that was in it that
it was attached to the rails.
So the people, the guards watching him in the room, they see him disappear. It's almost like you could say, oh, well, maybe he's just sitting on the other side of this thing, on the other side of that little wall in the shower. After 25 minutes, they went to go check on him, and that's when they found the hole in the ground, a hole in the shower. And then so they went down, like, what the crap? And so he had gone down. They believe that he ran out on that motorcycle to get out, and the government was obviously egg on their face when he got out for the second time. So he disappeared into the ether. And they were, pretty upset. And the U.S. was like, "Are you kidding me? You could not hold him in that prison. He got out again." And the Mexican government's like, "Yeah." In fact, there was a delegation of Presidente Felipe Calderon and his Minister of Secretary of Security or whatever they went to France on like a trip, and they both, or at least the Secretary of Security, I think it was called, he came back to
when this happened.
Yeah, he came back because this happened, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is a big deal." And interestingly, though, I was watching a Vice documentary about this, and they let the reporter go into the tunnel from the house and just kind of look around a little bit, and then they let him go in to the other end of the tunnel from the prison, but the government has not yet allowed anybody to transverse the entire length of the tunnel. So that's a little fishy, some people say. They say, well, maybe the government is just like making this up. Maybe they were just let out of jail. But it's probably likely he used the tunnel. But I think it's weird that the government hasn't let anybody transverse the entire tunnel to make sure it actually connects. So the second manhunt begins, right? So a Mexican actress, Kate del Castillo, and Sean Penn requested to interview him for a Rolling Stones article. And they met him at a remote ranch, and he told them that he had a fleet of narco submarines, airplanes, trucks, and boats, and that he supplied more heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine and marijuana than anybody else in the world. So obviously he was pounding his chest, boasting of what he can do.
And still doing it.
And that would have led to his downfall here because they got captured again. This meeting helped direct police to where he was, which led them to raid the ranch. This led to a shootout, but he was actually able to escape. In January 2016, the military and Navy tried to capture him again at another location along the coast, but he was able to escape through another tunnel that was 1.5 kilometers long. He was able to escape through another tunnel and in one of these other houses. It's like
this guy's like a tunnel rat.
Yeah, seriously, man. He's got escape hatches everywhere. What was that like? You watched Better Call Saul, right?
Yeah.
Did you see when Lalo escaped through the tunnel?
Uh-uh.
Oh, well. Lalo has a... You know who Lalo is, right?
Yeah.
He's one of the cartel guys.
I've only seen the first few of them.
Anyway, it's a really good episode. You'll have to see that. But he's also got a tunnel. They come try to kill him, and he's got a tunnel in his house, and so he goes out the tunnel. So he escaped through that tunnel. They stole a car, and then they were driving down, and then two police officers, this is still in Mexico, stopped him. Guzman, El Chapo, attempted to bribe the officers with offers of cash, properties, offers of jobs. When these officers refused, he told them, "You are all going to die." The four police officers sent pictures of Guzman, El Chapo, to their superiors, who were tipped that 40 assassins were on their way to free him. And so to avoid the counterattack by the cartel members, the policemen were told to take their prisoners to a motel on the outskirts of town to wait for reinforcements. And later they handed over the prisoners to the Marines, and then they took him back to the prison he had just escaped from. Well, months earlier, but yeah, I was kind of reading that one part, and I was like, oh man, there's just like an Alamo type standoff between the cartels and these four police officers who decided not to be corrupt,
Yeah.
But it didn't look like there was any type of standoff like that. And then so the extradition, immediately the U.S. was like, okay, hand him over now, please. Enough games. You guys obviously can't handle someone like this. And so El Chapo's lawyers put up a fight, and in the end, a Mexican federal judge involved in the extradition was assassinated later. Likely by El Chapo's guys, right? Because he didn't play along. And he was finally extracted 1 year later in 2017 to New York, where he stood trial. Interestingly enough, in the trial, all the witnesses were kept anonymous, so they couldn't be targets. He was found guilty of...
All the jurors, you mean?
All the jurors, yeah, I'm sorry. He was found guilty of a bunch of different stuff. He was sentenced to 30 years, life plus 30 years, in order to forfeit $12.6 billion.
Or to forfeit.
No, and ordered
ordered
to forfeit. He was then transferred to Colorado Supermax prison facility. Solitary confinement.
Is he still there?
Still there to this day. I don't think he's getting out unless the cartel... That's the most secure prison in the U.S., I believe. It's a Supermax prison in Colorado. I think it's in Colorado Springs.
Interesting.
So that's the real deal, man. You do not want to go to that Supermax prison.
Well, I guess if you live the life of 100 men before you actually get to that point, how old is he? Do you think?
I mean, I think he's in his 50s probably. Just based off of the pictures, I don't know how old he actually is. I mean, he was. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but
that's an interesting one. Crazy. Yeah, slippery as a snake. I don't know how.
Paid off everybody around him, man.
Hey, man, grease in the hand.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have another one here. A guy named Richard Mcnair. So his father was a police officer, but he got involved in a bunch of different things, and he actually killed 2 people, and was sentenced and put in a federal prison in Pollock, Louisiana. And so on April 5th, 2006, he built it within the prison. So I guess he worked in kind of an area where they would, like the mail room area of the prison. So he actually built a compartment or a makeshift compartment inside of this big box that was being shipped. So he built himself a compartment within that box that was a very, very, very tight squeeze for him, that he had to have. He like retrofitted it with like a breathing tube to go out and everything else. Well, he placed himself in this box and set it next to the mail bag or the mail pile that was supposed to be taken out.
He must have been a small guy.
Yeah, so I have no idea, but obviously the mail bag coming out of a prison is going to be, or the mail pile is going to be massive, and it's going to be all different kinds of stuff. So just this big box that was sitting next to this big pile was, well, okay, this goes too, and so it was taken out as well. And so it was taken to a nearby warehouse that was on the outside of the prison. It was actually taken there with a forklift because it was like this really heavy box. I mean, obviously they didn't know a person was inside of it, but they took it to a warehouse that was outside of the prison. So the guy, Richard, this is what he said about the box. He said, so this is in Louisiana in late April. And
gosh.
So he says, the heat was unbelievable. The inside of the pod felt like a furnace. Sweat rolled off me, and my head was swimming in the fog. I was afraid I would pass out. It was such a tight fit. I couldn't wipe the sweat from my brow, and it was running into my eyes and down my neck, dripping from the tip of my nose and everywhere else. So it was so tight that he couldn't even like wipe the sweat.
Oh my gosh!
That he was just like, it was just sitting there, it was just like, and so he could kind of hear what was going on in the warehouse. But once the warehouse staff left for lunch, he cracked the box open and he bolted and he ran, and he was actually caught running down a nearby railway by a police officer, and the police officer's like, hey, stop, we got a prisoner on the loose here, whatever, was talking to him. He actually convinced the police officer that he was not the guy who just had escaped from a prison.
Didn't he have a prison get up on?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But he just convinced the cop that he was just like out for a jog, or that he was just like, I'm not that guy.
Oh gosh.
And the cop just was like, okay. So this was April of 2006. And so the cop just let him go, and he remained at large until late 2007 when he was arrested for driving a stolen vehicle.
Oh, no way.
So, yeah, so I mean, he escaped and he was at large for over a year and a half. Just kind of, I mean, I don't know what kind of quality of life he was living, but
That's crazy.
yeah, he mailed himself out of prison.
Hmm.
It was interesting.
That's wild. I actually was one of the ones I was saying, this happens recently, or just recently, like this past month, there was a guy who broke out of jail, and there was a family of 5 that was on vacation in Airbnb. It was like in the woods or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He killed all of them. And he was, I think, eventually captured, but
Yeah.
it's like, dude, we need to get some serious prison
Reform
here. We need to get these things locked down, man. These people shouldn't be escaping all the time. Why are we putting people into prison with a plaster ceiling?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, is that you have these, and this is, criminals go to prison to become better criminals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they have all day, every day, to think about stuff like this.
Yeah.
And they just sit in a room all day, and they, most of the time, they don't have like any sort of entertainment or whatever else. And so what are they going to do? They're going to poke and prod and pinch and whatever else and figure out, what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah.
And they're going to push the limits.
Yeah.
The last one that I had was from, remember the movie Catch Me If You Can?
Yep.
So the guy's name was, that was Leonardo DiCaprio, but the actual guy's name was Frank Abagnale.
Mm-hmm.
And he had done a bunch of different things and counterfeiting and impersonating different people and stealing bunches of money and all kinds of stuff. So he ultimately was captured in France in 1969, and he spent 6 months in a regional prison and then another 6 months in Sweden, where he was then deported to the United States. And so he was sentenced to 12 years at a federal detention center in Atlanta, Georgia. So he, realizing that they convicted him or whatever it's called, and then they were actually moving him from one prison to he had been in a prison system for a while, but they were moving him from one prison to another prison. And the guards from the prison that he was going to, I mean, they didn't know who he was. They didn't know him from Adam, right? But the guards, they were like talking out loud to themselves in the transport vehicle, and they were suspicious that if he was a prison inspector from the FBI. And so they were kind of, because it was kind of a weird circumstance, and they were like, oh, you're not a prison inspector, are you? And they were just kind of joking with him, but they were trying to see if he would like admit to being a prison inspector.
Yeah.
Because it was such a weird circumstance that they were moving him at that time. And so he got to work, right? He started conning these guys. And I mean, Abagnale was he was a con man. And so
he's a confidence man. And
he started playing it. He started playing that angle, and he started, and whatever else. And he started saying, well, no, I'm not, and everything. Well, eventually he kind of convinced him that, okay, guys, all right, you caught me. And so he convinced him that he was a prison inspector that was under contract by the FBI to check out the prison security or whatever else. So he asked one of the guys, he said, okay, he said, hey, can I borrow one of you guys' car? He said, I need to go do something. I'm this prison investigator guy. He had for some reason, he had gotten some kind of fake document or something like that.
Is this while he's in prison, or is this
was
still in
what-
the car on the way over there?
Well, this was he had gone to prison and back and forth or whatever, but this was kind of during the transport.
Okay, yeah.
And he had a some sort of documentation thing that said that he wasn't an inmate, and I'm not exactly sure what the document said, But he convinced these guys that, yeah, he was just a prison investigator under contract by the FBI. He convinced them that, hey, I need to borrow your car for a couple minutes. I'll be right back, yada, yada, yada. And so they gave him the keys to their car, and he got in their car, and he was gone. He was arrested 2 months later in Washington, D.C., and he was... They re-imprisoned him and gave him 4 more years for escaping.
Wow.
And so it's something that's just kind of interesting, that the confidence of, well, number one, the stupidity of the guards to even like...
They had no idea who they were dealing with.
They had no idea who they're dealing with. And they were like asking it, it's like, dude, don't even freaking talk to the convict.
Yeah. His ability to con you is literally why he's in jail.
And so, I mean, they didn't know that, but still, I mean, he saw an opportunity and he ran with it, literally.
That's funny.
Convinced someone to literally give them their car keys and took their car.
Yeah,
Imagine how dumb you'd feel as that.
Yeah.
as that.
You gave him what? Well, he
was really convincing.
Yeah.
I wanted him to give me a good report, It's like,
exactly.
Oh, geez.
I was trying to do it for you, Warden.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So that's just kind of a short story that I read quickly, and I mean, I just kind of briefly described it, but yeah, these are really interesting. People are
crafty
and slippery, and they a lot of times they outthink the police, and they outthink the people, the security guard that's standing there, the correctional officer in the prison.
That's thinking about his home life or thinking about something else.
Yeah,
his
divorce or his whatever else.
And how many times do I see in the news where you get one of these guys, these prisoners, that will seduce a female guard?
Yep.
And then she ends up letting him out, and they're on the run. That happens all the time. It's just like these manipulations.
I mean, or how are people getting drugs into prison, or cell phones, or whatever else? It's a lot of times it's prison guards. They're smuggling that stuff in, and they're getting bribes.
Yep.
I just watched Shot Caller the other day. Yeah. I had seen pieces of it, but I watched it all the way through. It was good.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
I think the preview is better than the whole movie.
It's good enough to watch.
It was crazy. Yeah, he turns into an absolute monster.
Yeah, but... All right, guys. Well, hopefully you enjoyed some of these stories. They were entertaining to you. I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but hey, we like history. We like learning about these kind of things. And if
you ever escaped prison, let us know. We'll have you on.
Yes, do that.
So anyway, thanks for joining us today. Let's build that creed together.
All right, let's do it.